Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our 4th annual Write Out Loud performance. We are thrilled to have a full house tonight. Look at this, it's amazing. Essentially a full house, but close enough for government work. My name is Michael Tamburino. I'm the manager of performing arts programs here at the museum. Before we get started, I have a couple of quick housekeeping things to go through with you. Please silence your cell phones, watches, or any other noise-making devices before we get started, as that can be distracting to audience members around you. Please also take a moment now to look for the exits nearest to you. There's one to your right here that you would have to press a green button to open, one to your left, and one just behind you. Today's performance will also have an approximately 10-minute intermission, and please keep in mind your step as you are moving over the cable. It should be taped down securely, but just watch your step as you're moving about the auditorium. This performance series began life virtually in 2020 as a way to give voice to the astonishing variety of literary talent present right here in our upstate New York community. The 22 works you'll hear tonight were selected anonymously by our reading committee from a record number of submissions and feature poetry, short fiction, narrative nonfiction, a theatrical piece, and more. We're featuring more writers tonight than in any subsequent year, about any prior year. You caught it. Before each piece is read tonight, the lights will dim and a brief introductory note will be read about the writer. When the lights come back up, the actor or writer will begin reading the piece, and when the lights dim once again, you'll know the piece has concluded. I will also let you know that a recording of tonight's performance will premiere on Fenimore Art Museum's YouTube channel a week from today, Saturday, April 27th at 7 p.m. So please look forward to sharing that with friends, family, and colleagues who couldn't be here with us this evening. If you enjoyed your time tonight, please consider making a donation of any size at the door, as free programs like this are made possible largely by your generous support. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the work of these spectacularly talented writers. Thank you very much. Our first poem is Shipwreck at Race Point, Ptown, written and read by Rosanne Westgate. Rosanne has been writing poetry since high school, and her collection is voluminous. She has a small practice in Cooperstown as a cognitive diagnostician and therapist. The people she has met over the years have inspired her with their humanness, which is so much a part of poetry. She feels that reading and writing poetry can be therapeutic and can help us all to heal. Many of her poems are a reaction to something she has observed in nature, whether environmental or human, and tying that into an experience. She often carries a small notebook with her to jot down some of her thoughts. She got this idea from Mary Oliver, whose poems she has collected over the years. When one writes poetry, good poetry, you might just hear a lovely piece of music which soothes you.
I'd like to thank Sam Ross, Cooperstown Photography, for the inspiration, for this beautiful photograph, for his gift to all of us. Shipwreck in Provincetown. Toppled, red-hulled. On its side, the beached and broken wreckage, thrown across the jetty, strangled in the mast. The smell of rotting barnacles who make it their home. She knows the pulse of the tides all too well, sometimes struggling to right herself atop the sandy shoals, jilted by a nor'easter, with his cold blue gaze and steady rolls of the waves. He resumes the melody of the sea, guided from the equinox to the solstice. Season followed by season, his secret encrusted in the sailing vessel. Her pieces lost and drifting in the residue of a love that never began and a love that will never be.
Our next poem is called The Artist, a look-but by Wendy Everard, with artwork by Charlie Reed. Wendy Everard started writing poetry in elementary school with an epic verse composition called Raccoons. Luckily, as the years progressed, she improved. She moved on to write for educational journals. She teaches at Cazenovia High School for educational conferences, and still, she writes poetry for pleasure. A teacher at Cazenovia since the year 2000, she currently teaches English 12, creative writing, and AP English literature, and her favorite subject for poetry is her two beautiful daughters. Though originally from Buffalo, her home is in Erieville with her husband Jim and their two cats, Pablo and Chip.
The Artist, a look-but. Up the frame, his name it crawls, as cross the canvas sprawls his art. Entwined, our lives take part, but far. Though busy as we are, our hearts in sympathy, on par, retain the pleasure and the pain of trying to maintain the thread that keeps us bound instead of leaving words unsaid, unframed.
Our next poem is called I Used to Live Alone Before I Knew You by David Waite. It's performed by Michael Henrici. David Waite teaches English at Onondaga Community College, where he is also a tutor for the Learning Center. Formerly, he was a visiting instructor for Cazenovia College. David is a graduate of the Master of Fine Arts in Writing program from Goddard College and works with alumni to coordinate the Clockhouse Writers Conference. He also serves on the editorial staff of Clockhouse, the multi-genre literary journal created in 2011. His first book, The All-Night Diner Lights, was published in 2018. His most recent publication was in Syracuse's Stone Canoe. David has very fond memories of visiting the Thaw Collection of American Indian Art at Fenimore Art Museum when he was a child, and more recently, the Keith Haring and M.C. Escher exhibitions.
The Saturday City, brick streets bright with blackberry wine, peppers soft with garlic, sheets of bop, wagons pulling toddlers, the record store in the basement, the record store in the chic block, the tea shop with cannabis honey, the thousand strolling Church Street, alive in soft jeweled memory. And the day draws finer, we wander down to the ice cream stand above the long lake, their vanilla made with maple. 100 kids with summer families spinning through the hail light, but the speakers play a hymn that pleads for love against raw violence. And this morning we stood across the suburb drive from the nondescript Office of Immigration, which we breathe nightly in dark ashes. Try to swallow, try to reckon, what we can even do at all with all of us standing in the street. Roughly it sits back of the mind, a little crack in evening. Sunset nears, we step to the shore with its blue stones flat and cradled. Beneath the rocks lie fat bottles of cheap champagne, bad fifths of liquor, bashed and broken. But all darkness, even dust, is washed to the feet of the boulders. We too safe above the sheen. Cream melting down the cone, white drips that we rescue. A trim crowd of boats at anchor. The sunset all breaking, bubbled with the saffron, the lapping and nipping mist of sun-glowing amber tossed across Champlain onto Port Douglas. The last bit of ice cream in the cone with a little pop of crackling sugar. Later there'll be a wave of hard consternation, a growing seed of loneliness, though it's we two together. There's a space rising around you with indecision, a small but deep fissure that shakes from pine foundation. But this evening there's a festival, rolling clouds of purpled fog with fragrant stripes like peanut butter, and while we rest on the rocks, we could hear without paying. The sun draws gushing clouded ponds of red and peach writ slow with arrows, and the band calls a woman to carry a song from Leonard Cohen, the one prayer we still believe. And the little print of you with the vein curled below your left eye. You close your senses while you sing, verse after verse, the sun in its last light. Ice cream full in belly all around, thousands walking strong, unhurried. Spy your face softly with eyes held brief in darkness. The sun below rightly seeing and all its afterlife ambrosia. The chorus ends, but here we are for a little while longer and all our goodness beyond measure. And now, this is a memory.
Our first piece of narrative nonfiction is titled Shout Out You're Dead. It's written and read by Terrence Dwyer. Terry Dwyer is a retired state trooper, attorney, and university professor. When he is not in the classroom lecturing on constitutional law, he is contentedly writing. Terry is the author of 3 textbooks, a recently completed creative nonfiction manuscript, and a national law enforcement columnist. He is also a playwright and Dramatist Guild member whose plays have been produced regionally in the Hudson Valley and Central New York. The father of 3 and grandfather of 5, Terry resides in Cooperstown with his wife, Joan.
The obituary column is a strange piece of reporting. A lifetime is culled into a few short paragraphs to create a denouement. The noteworthy or notorious merit professional scribes recount their days, while the rest of us are left to a chosen relative who an aunt or sibling decides is good with words. Often the result is a hackneyed essay replete with a roll call of relatives and the deceased's hobbies. If the family is willing to upgrade, the newspaper will print a photograph of the dearly departed. Those who've led the truly great life merit a multi-paragraph, 2-column profile in the New York Times. That kind of tribute elevates the obituarist to a fledgling biographer. This is not to say that necrology can't be literary. There's Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River Anthology with 244 epitaphs of fictional lives. It sums up everything an obituary should be, an honest assessment of the life that was lived. Secrets are exposed, lies uncovered, grudges sustained, jealousies revealed, and gossip confirmed. Nothing is erased by death in Spoon River. It's carried over to the next realm. One morning, shortly after we were married 37 years ago, I saw my wife reading the obituary column in our local newspaper. It was strange to see my young bride reading through the section like my 82-year-old Irish grandmother once did. When I asked why she was reading about dead people, her simple reply was even more shocking. To see who died. Who are you expecting to find, I asked, wondering if there was something about her past I missed while we were engaged. Like she was a zombie hunter, or worse yet, a black widow in training. Nobody, just checking, she said, and continued sipping tea and reading. I left for work that day, thinking it was a phase that would surely pass. My paternal grandmother had no seemingly lucid reason either for reading the obituaries. I once asked her why she read the daily tabulation of the local dead. To know who I'll not be expecting to see at next Sunday's Mass, was her response in the soft Tipperary lilt of her voice. At the time, my teenage mind was alarmed because I was sure Grandma was going senile. It wasn't until I was a few decades into adulthood that I understood the Irishness and the complete sense of her response. The shock of not seeing Eileen Rogan or Bernadette Cummings or Mary Donahue at Mass would be alleviated by the knowledge their souls were at peace. I haven't totally bought into the premise, but in her world and the parochial character of my upbringing, it made sense. Still, Joan's daily review of the obituaries perturbed me from time to time. Granted, it did allow us to attend 2 wakes of acquaintances, family members, that we would have otherwise missed. They were people on the periphery of our lives, but important enough to attend their loved ones' wakes. It's remarkable the impact your attendance at a wake can have on the bereaved. Joan's unusual reading hobby provided a small, loving touch to at least 2 people's lives. It's something my mother always did. I think it's an Irish thing, Joan told me when I again asked. Then she laughed. You know, my grandfather used to say that was the first thing he checked in the morning. If his name wasn't in the obituary, he knew he was still alive. Joan lit up at the memory, and then continued stride with another family anecdote. Remember what your Aunt May used to say whenever she read somebody's obituary? I drew a blank. I didn't know they were sick, she replied with a giggle before heading downstairs to the laundry room with a basket of clothing. These obituary discussions clearly did not arise at any point while we were dating. Obituaries are traced to the Romans. But since they get credit for everything, I suspect the idea was stolen from elsewhere. Reflections upon the dead had to precede the advent of togas and public baths. For example, ancient Egypt existed for 3 millennia before the Roman Empire. Tomb hieroglyphics were a pre-literate graphic rendition of a person's life. Prior to that, there must have been cave drawings honoring the deceased that some Neanderthal spouse viewed in the morning over her breakfast of leaves, tree bark, and insects. The one question I have regarding this recounting of a deceased life is how it is handled by those who believe in reincarnation. Are they merely notes passed on to the future self, as in, here's what you did the first time around, don't mess it up? Either that or an encouragement, as in, hey, you can't do any worse. Then there is the unforgettable resurrection of Jesus moment that dashed any ancient obituary writer's hope of literary immortality. Christian belief is that Jesus was exalted into heaven to sit at the right hand of God. His exaltation is an enhancement of life. Thus, no death means no obituary. To verify this, I checked Google. Sure enough, there was no archived obituary for Jesus of Nazareth. If there was, though, I'm sure Joan would have read it. To be thorough, I checked ChatGPT, and upon doing so, realized I was giving a death notice to critical thinking. But I persisted. AI confirmed that Jesus did not have an obituary because he lived over 2,000 years ago in the 1st century AD, prior to the practice of publishing obituary columns. However, the AI genie waffled by saying the 4 Gospels and the New Testament account for Jesus' life, teachings, and death. Could it be that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were the first published obituary writers? Joan read her first obituary when she was 12 years old. She was a news junkie as a child and read the local paper from cover to cover. Being as thorough as she is, this invariably included her reading every single obituary. Curiosity about the once robust lives of the dead motivated her, and the habit was formed. Soon she and her mother were comparing notes on the dead. Later, settled into married life and ever eager to assist in the growth of my law practice, she notified me whenever a local attorney died. Those grieving clients may have needed the warm shoulder of a licensed and living lawyer to cry upon, but I never found the referrals to be forthcoming. Nonetheless, Joan's reading pleasure continued unabated through pregnancy, raising 3 children, nursing school, career, travel, and retirement. Although in recent years that has met with competition from Facebook Marketplace. Predictably, she homes in on the estate sales. Recently, I showed Joan a clip from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where an Eric Idle is traveling through the medieval countryside with a cart of dead people. They are victims of the bubonic plague, and as he travels through a local village, he bangs a pot while shouting, "Bring out your dead." It's a classic of British humor. Only the Monty Python troupe could make the Black Death funny. I expected her to join me in my mirth while watching the sketch, but was disappointed when she didn't share my enjoyment. "Don't you get it?" I asked her. She shook her head. "It reminds me of the obituaries you read, except they're like saying, 'Shout out your dead,'" I explained. Joan looked at me puzzled by the humor I found in the analogy. My further explanation of the slang meaning of a shout-out as a sign of appreciation didn't even raise a smile from her. She went for her daily long walk, and I rewatched the Monty Python video. Whether we read them or not, the obituary column catches up with all of us. Sometimes it comes in quick succession. For Joan, that occurred in 2017 when her mother died after a brief illness. She wrote her mom's obituary with the help of her younger sister, Christine. 2 years later, she wrote Christine's obituary when my beautiful sister-in-law lost her brave 6-year battle with breast cancer. I provided the final edits for the obituary and later gave the eulogy. Those are 2 obituaries I wish Joan never had to read, let alone write. But they celebrated the lives of 2 special women. I still tease Joan about reading the obituary column and tell her normal people do crossword puzzles or Sudoku. But now that she reads the local newspaper online, the tales of the dead are instantly accessible on her tablet or iPhone. Wordle sometimes distracts her. A few years ago, I gave her my copy of Spoon River Anthology to read. Unlike the Monty Python skit, this recommendation she liked. Even though I still refuse to read the obituaries, Joan's fascination with them has provided me with an appreciation of the necessity for everyone to shout out your dead.
next poem is called Dragonfly. It's written and read by Sally Pollock Zaengle. Sally Zaengle has lived in Cooperstown most of her life. She graduated from Cooperstown High School in 1977, then from Syracuse University in 1982 with a degree in psychology. That degree came in handy as she spent the bulk of her adult life raising 8 children. She wrote her first poem in first grade for her teacher, Miss Kelly. It was about ducks. Now she has moved on to dragonflies. Clearly, she is easily amused. You can find her most weekdays at the Clark Sports Center, where she works at the front desk, the membership office, and with the Connections program.
Dragonfly. Dragonfly in my hand, delicate, fragile, and beautiful. I took you from the cat, still you flew. I'm awed at your metal. You shimmer, you settle, and then you fly away. The nothing that you weigh that fluttered in my hand lingers, so fragile, grand.
Our next piece is Daisy Ball, written and read by Amy Randall. Amy Randall is a contributing essayist to the Christian Science Monitor, a former magazine editor, a master gardener, and the mother of 2 tender-hearted boys. Her collection of essays, entitled Not Hollow, Good Choices Make Lousy Stories, will be performed by her this summer in a one-woman show, thanks to the generous support of the Delaware County Arts Grant.
Before my sisters stopped talking to me, my nephews visited our farm every summer. It was a sun-baked chance to show 3 city boys the joys of country living, and it was grand. But once adolescence got them in its grip, the tenor of the visits changed, and not in a good way. Relentless competition over absolutely everything, and the accompanying searing insults became the soundtrack of the season. The summer the eldest turned 15, we built a baseball field in the meadow as a memorial to my dad, their grandfather, a long-suffering Brooklyn Dodgers fan who taught me everything about the greatest game ever invented. I imagined a field of dreams of camaraderie would bloom, where the eldest would stop hating his brother long enough to tell him what a great arm he had. The quiet one would feel what it's like to connect on the sweet spot of the batter, get his glove on a line drive down the third base line in the nick of time. But the boys, my 2 and the 3 nephews, were only interested in what the team t-shirt should look like and in finding legit Major League Baseballs instead of the lame set I bought on Amazon. Well, they've got to have them at Dick's. You said Dick. Hey, we should totally call it penises from now on. Good one, penises. I played my last mom card from atop the tractor the day we broke ground, scowling with my hands on my hips. Boys, I shouldn't have to ask for help. You should want to help. But I couldn't sell it, and I was outnumbered, and plus, has that line ever worked? No. Go away, I said, pretending to be mad. Now, if I turn the bucket of the tractor all the way upside down, I thought, I bet I can just drag it along the ground and it'll pick up sod and rocks so the batter's box and the base paths will be smooth. I imagined it would work like that scrapey thing waiters used at the restaurants I frequented in the 80s. It doesn't at all. You see, the bucket of a tractor is neither the right shape nor weighted enough, so when dragged across uneven ground upside down and backward, it just bangs up and down. So I decided to go forward instead and try to lift the sod up ever so gently. Again, impossible. There is no gentle setting on a John Deere tractor. It was going to be a complete waste of time. Except now, maybe the boys could practice fielding bad hops off partially unearthed boulders that grew so beautifully on my land. I had zero idea the damage I was doing, even though there was a furnace-like heat coming off the engine. I kept going, because there was no nasty black smoke. Nasty black smoke was my signal to turn the goddamn thing off, walk back to the house from some outdoor project I was doing poorly, and emotionally eat whatever was in the bread box. Did you know that letting a tractor cool down is the rural equivalent of turning your router on and off? It's true. Sometimes it works, and you feel like a badass. And sometimes it doesn't, which means you have to put the effing thing back in the barn, black smoke rising, drive setting on 1, and hope that the next time someone comes over to borrow it, they'll know more about tractors than you do. Content with the good enough ball field, we played our inaugural game. It was summer. It was hot. And no one was hydrated. It was a perfect storm, some might say. And it made Doubleday's genius an absolute nightmare. Just swing at anything, dipshit. Walks are boring and stupid. Why is the sun always in my eyes? Oh my God, you were totally out. It's so humid. We said no stealing. Do we have batting gloves? I was relegated to catcher, the position no one wanted because I couldn't afford a backstop, and the quality of pitching was subpar. So the at-bats were as interminable as the batter's insults. Oh my God, do you even know what a strike zone is? Ugh, just throw it underhand, loser. The job of Daisy, our dog, was to snatch any baseballs hit, but not caught by someone sulking in the outfield, because they never get to pitch, and hide them in the tall grass. We instituted the daisy ball rule. So if she got hold of the ball, you could take your base and any runners could advance. They'd scream, "Daisy ball!" in jubilant unison. It was the only rule they never fought about. Not entirely fed up with the endless arguing and complaining, I decided that we'd have a home run derby the following week. If you hit the ball into the pond about 150 feet from home plate, you'd get a $25 iTunes gift card. I wanted them to pitch to each other, to encourage and support. It didn't matter to me who won, but it mattered a lot to them. They went out there every evening and hit buckets of balls till the sun went down. I'd stand at the kitchen sink doing the dinner dishes and watch. Their caustic remarks were delightfully silenced by the crack of rawhide on ash, or metal, if you're going to cheat, asshole. The quietest nephew ran in one night after everyone had given up, now sequestered in their rooms doing God knows what. Aunt Amy, I did it. I got one in the pond. I kept throwing it up in the air, and I finally hit one. It was pretty much a rocket right into the pond. Oh, that's incredible, I said. Let's go up and fish it out so you can sign it. Oh, no, that's okay, he said hastily. It's too dark. We'll go look for it tomorrow. It was then that I knew. Later, with everyone in bed, including me, I heard a tiny knock on my door. Aunt Amy, are you awake? Barely, honey. Come on in. The door opened. The quiet nephew came in and sat at the foot of my bed. I can't sleep. Oh, dear, what's wrong? I said. I have something to tell you, but it's kind of embarrassing. And he turned away. I didn't hit the ball in the pond. He said, I wanted to, and I tried really hard, but I didn't, and I don't know why I lied. Oh, honey, I knew it when you said you didn't want to go and find it. Well, then why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted you to know what it feels like to have a lie roll around in your head. I wanted you to know how good it is to tell the truth no matter what. So, do you feel any better? Yes, I do. Well, then I'm happy to announce that you are the winner of the home run derby. But I didn't get it in the pond. But you told a hard truth, I said, and that's a whole lot more important. I love you, Aunt Amy. I love you too, honey. Take out the garbage before you go to bed. He didn't.
Our next poem, entitled Sometime Else, was written by Joanne Corey and is read by Christine Juliano. Joanne Corey is a late-blooming poet from Vestal, New York, where she is active with the Binghamton Poetry Project, Broome County and Tioga Arts Councils, and the Grapevine Poets. A native New Englander, she returns to the Berkshires often, including an annual residency with the Boiler House Poets Collective at the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art in North Adams. Sometime Else is from her first chapbook, Hearts, which was published in 2023 by Kelsey Books. She invites you to visit her author site, joannecorey.com, for links to her work and to read her eclectic blog, Top of JC's Mind, which recently celebrated its 10th anniversary.
Sometime else. You wake from a nap and look at the clock, which reads 10:35. I'm late for school. It's okay, I say, trying to sound calm and reassuring. You knit your brow and you reassess the clock face, trying to make sense of it. Are you sure I'm not late for school? Yes, everything is fine. You graduated. You look relieved and laugh and smile as you drift back into sleep. Crying before the bathroom mirror, I glimpse your mother, seeing what you must have seen in my tired eyes. I'm grateful I had the presence of mind not to call you Mom.
Our next spoken word piece is called Polka Dots. It's written and performed by Rick Van Valkenburg. Rick Van Valkenburg is a descendant of James Fenimore Cooper's fictional Old Dutch character, Colonel Abraham Van Valkenburg, from the book Satan's Toe. He lives and writes in the bookstore village of the Catskills, Hobart, New York. He's a member of the Stamford Writers Circle and will be reading at Liberty Rock Books in Hobart on Sunday, May 5th at 2 p.m. and performing in the Page to Stage event June 20th to 21st at the Michael Kudich Natural History Preserve in Stamford, New York.
Looking in the lens to get a cleanse, sinking to the ground, things get a little skewed. Don't you agree? All you have to do is write. No, not ready, but the onus is on us. It will own us. Circle around and come up for air. What do you do with yourself now? I know there was grumbling about my non-sequiturian beliefs, but be assured I'll try to suppress my hunch of quasi-motives. I didn't want to be left alone with it. You know, the mind, that mind, a mind that seemed so simple. It was alive, insatiable, and first-person plural. Our minds, though simple, vexed us with complex desires. Rage would fill our thoughts, anger management issues, destructive behavior, rebellion against the corrupt. The threads of our existence were trivialized and frayed. We were sick of the ragged perceptions of ourselves. We were unacknowledged for our suffering. The strings unraveled from the skein. Emotions, admit it, God damn it, emotions, moods in motion, fear and shame, and stuck in something relative to our sticky existence. Sick of accusations of deviance. Try something else on for size. Leave me alone, please. Portrait of an ordinary guy in disguise. The monitor flickered, the screen filled with a telecast from a distant planet made from mountains of bones, fossils of unrecognized alien forms. Then I spotted a being with overarching eyebrows and a barcode mustache. I tried to scan it, but the vampire's nostril damned us. It was a mistake. No, it must ache when you take two words and cultivate the space between them, fill up the philtrum, and an Italian mustache turns out to Buffy, the vampire killer. I was starting to riff on that, but Raph attacked. Raph was jealous of the I in riff, suffered from crazy vowel movements. It felt inferior because of its I-A. You may feel threatened by riff-raff.
but they're really just angry with themselves. The riffraff is in need of understanding, especially the raff. And may I suggest, maybe riff needs to be separated from the raff, like wheat from the chaff. No grain, no gain, if you know what I mean. Even if I don't. Riff-raff, rough and ready, hold steady, so let us do what we need to do. Let us get choked up and fumble around on the ground, gasping, trying to gasp, trying to grasp the glass. Bottoms up, my friends. He was knock-kneed and feeble-minded. He never typed out the juicy parts, not when I knew him. I asked him why, and he said that a hen told him never to show your cock when a cock-o-doodle will do. Then she laid an egg, and even though it was hard-boiled, he scrambled to get out of there. He was never the same since. He was avocado toast. Over easier said than done, choked by the yolk. Another time there was a moment. I was all of a sudden, all the time, you know, now, without the K. Then I tried to watch everything everywhere all at once. Twice. I couldn't stay awake. When I finally woke up, I went limp. I was past tense. Present. There's no time like the present, especially Christmas morning. Thanks, Mom. Thanks to the dad who immaculated the Virgin Mary to cuckold Joe's holy chagrin. What's the etymology of absurd? Look it up. Oh, I certainly will. God willing. God is willing, if your soul can pay the bill. God's will and testament, the meek shall inherit the earth. God is so powerful, they don't need me to argue theology. And God created pronouns. Humans tend to recognize only them. God, the supergender. God made Eve and gave her a tricky choice. She chose to trust snakes. Then Adam went along with Eve because it's easier to take chances with God than Eve's nod of disappointment. Praise math from whom all blessings flow, if calculated correctly. Praise God for making math understood. Not by me, I know how to crunch some numbers with a spreadsheet under covers, filling the cells with dreams of cognitive decline. It was never my design to mock the divine. My faith is like stretch pants, ecclesi-elastic with rational suspenders. Crystals coalesce by the command of the ringmaster's protein circus. Life seeps from the festering pool. Come, coagulate with me too, and muster my strength to march through the muck and mire of a tidal existence with strength and intestinal fortitude. The words do grow absurd as soon as the mouth opens and exhaled breath trips off my tongue, and the teeth fail to gnash. Brainstorming some mental crunches to produce unnuanced washboard absurd, from Latin, absurdus, out of tune, discordant. I've been a nervous Nelly with my pen. Let's clear the air. Focus. Hocus pocus, abracadaver. Spin things around. Wear a crown, King Chuck. A broken clock is right twice a day. Is a broken calendar right once an era? Oblivion every couple of eons. All that glitters is just data dust. AI, yai. Algorithms are sucking up that data dust, feeding and seeding the cloud, the big bloat swelling sub-pixel marionation. I can't be absorbed. Then the big data dump, cramping cloud burst, diarrhea, AI everywhere. Oh, the humanity, machine-learned humility. And in the blink of an eye, the inkwell runs dry. Do you know what an inkwell is? It's something Edgar Allan Poe drank from. He dossed down a few laudanum and ink cocktails. Bottoms up, my friend. You get choked up and fumble around on the ground, gasping, trying to gasp, trying to grasp the glass. Bottoms up, my friend. He was knock-kneed, but not so feeble-minded. Bottoms up down the hatch, he'd lay out his notebook, gag and spew Edgar Allan polka dots.
Our next poem, In Red, is written and performed by Bala Jones. Bala Jones spent most of her professional life as a dancer, choreographer, and dance teacher in New York City. She danced with the New York City Opera, was dancing master at the Cloisters Museum, was the head of the junior dance division at the Brooklyn Music School. She choreographed for St. John the Divine, taught workshops at Smith College, Amherst College, and Barnard College, and was one of the choreographers for the Brooklyn Nutcracker. She has written poetry and short stories since grammar school and has been published in several literary magazines. Her work was selected to be part of Write Out Loud in 2022, 23, and 24.
In Red. My brother and I stood dry-eyed, looking at my mother inside the coffin that we had chosen for her, dressed in her favorite crimson Chinese silk, which I had laid out for her because she loved it. My mistake. Confined by vibrant color, the shrunken brittle shell of something lay. Something, not my mother. Something wizened, a leftover from the meal her disease had made of her. The viewing loomed. An open coffin? Neither of us had the heart for it. We decided to come back and argue about that later if we had to, with our aunts who thrived on funeral drama and our uncles who would be drunk by nightfall. Our father, now being stoic among the early funeral guests, would understand. It was the dress, the color of the dress. Seal it, my brother suddenly commanded, viewing it too, closed coffin. We'll be back. He grabbed my arm, hustled us out. The autumn air, crisp as a fresh apple, smelled of memories. As we turned, grabbed each other, and stood sobbing in the road, and dead leaves, red as her dress, crunched into dust beneath our shoes. Thank you.
Our next poem is 1959, written and read by Robert Benson. Robert Benson's seventh book of poetry is What Lightning Spoke, New and Selected Poems, published by Bright Hill Press. He directed the writing programs at Hartwick College for 39 years, from 1978 to 2017.
My dad's new postman got hurt, my dad said. Or he'd be pitching in the major leagues right now. He's that fast. Hey, would you like him to come up Saturday? Would you like to catch him? Maybe let him watch you pitch, give you some tips. Hey, would I like a 95-mile-an-hour hammer in the head? I was, 12? I had a good drop curve, my coach taught me, but a fast one got away and hit a kid. The helmet went that way and the pitch just dropped him, and the ambulance came and, well, he was okay, but I wasn't sure I was. I learned that the blood throbbing in this arm was wild, and if mine was, so was anybody's. From then I dreaded my turn to bat. I'd flinch almost every pitch. I was diagnosed afraid of the ball. What to do, what to do. Thus was the injured ace sent for. If I could stand up to him, of whom should I be afraid? Saturday, the blonde god of baseball arrived on his Harley. The sonic boom arrived just after the ball rearranged the delicate bones in my palm. I caught every stinger. I caught every pitch after angry pitch after every clock he had to punch from then on pitch after every letter, postcard, magazine package he had to deliver pitch. Not the pitch he was born to deliver. He'd never throw that again. But he thought he'd show me how it could have been. I had to quell the shake in my skinny shoulders each time I dug the ball out to throw back. Slow, slower, slower, hoping he'd get the... So I threw fast. I threw faster and faster. I put everything I had in to throw back to him, but he didn't care. He just reached back. He threw harder. Where were all those White Sox, Red Sox, Yankee horseshit dreams now that he was showing his murderous stuff to the worthless son of his worthless boss? He didn't have to prove anything to anybody. I alone am survived to tell thee. After the massacre, my dad put his arm around my shoulder and said, well, say something? I opened my mouth, but the voice had been pounded out of me by a strange, avenging angel. I'd taken deeply in the marrows of my own hand the wrath of a man who would give his life and, if necessary, take mine, if he could use the one gift that he'd been given that made his life make sense. And so, if for the last time, for nobody else, to this useless kid, he would show not how to pitch, but how much it hurts not to.
The concluding story of the first half of tonight's program is The Mothers, written and read by Holyn Hewitt. Holyn Hewitt is a writer and editor from Burlington Flats, New York. She holds a BFA in writing from the Savannah College of Art and Design and an MFA in fiction from Bennington College. Her stories have been published in Stone Canoe, Hobart, Pank, and X-Ray, among others. The fourth generation to live on her 100-year-old dairy farm, Holly writes short essays about rural life that range from the difficult to the sublime at her Substack, Far Away.
Alec was 6 years old when they got the pigs. He was leaning over the fence with his mom, watching them prowl around, backs hunched as they sniffed everything. You know, she said without looking at him, pig mothers sometimes eat their babies. His spine stiffened and his skin prickled. He had just learned the day before that pigs were the most intelligent of animals, that you could train them as well as dogs, if not better. He was expecting to be friends with these pigs. She turned to him then, face contorted, hands raised to mimic sharp cloven hooves. Maybe someday I'll do the same to you. He gasped, took one step backwards. She laughed, but it only made it worse, this layering of the mother he knew on top of the nightmare of a mother who ate her children. He was not the sort of child to take a joke. From then on, his mother would bring the subject up regularly, but without speaking. She'd simply raise her hands and twist her face, and he would be reminded that at any minute, she could end him. This behavior was made worse by the fact that she was, most other times, loving and patient. She bought him value packs of markers and stacks of thick white paper. She started each morning by making him a colorful and precisely arranged breakfast. She could see that the cannibalistic mother pig act terrified him, and yet she didn't stop. It's called savaging, his father told him, staring into space as he accessed the hidden encyclopedic layers of his memory. They're not precisely sure why it happens, but it has something to do with the shock of sudden motherhood. Never mind that Alec was only 6, his father wouldn't dilute anything for him. Or perhaps because the mothers are stressed by their caretakers, by their environment. He lost interest and returned to the large, fine print book he was reading. Alec wandered around the rest of the afternoon, thinking about what his father had said. Just before dinner, he found his mother sitting in a chair in a corner of sunlight by the barn, her eyes closed. "How did it feel?" he began, then lost his nerve. He tried again. "How did it feel to become a mother?" "It was a shock," she said. That spring, they got the goats. "You know," his mother said, as they scratched the pregnant does' heads through the wooden fence, "some nannies abandon their babies." His fingers stilled on the coarse hair of the nanny goat's face. She gently nudged his hand, wanting him to resume. "Why?" he whispered. "Don't know, lots of reasons." His mom made a quiet bleating sound under her breath. Fear bolted through him, but he was 7 now, and so he stood his ground. "And then what happens?" "Well, you hope to find the kids before they die." She dusted off her hands and looked at him, her face as serious as he'd ever seen it. Whatever expression she saw on his face made her laugh. "Meh," she said, and walked away. He walked down the road to his uncle's house that afternoon. "Uncle," he said, "why do nanny goats abandon their kids?" "Well," said his uncle, who had all the parts of his lawnmower spread out on the lawn, "could be the living conditions, I suppose. You know, animals are real sensitive to smell, so maybe if the kids smelled strange, the nanny wouldn't want it." When he got home, he drew himself a bath and scrubbed. He even gingerly lay back in the water and got his hair wet, though he hated to do it, hated the rivulets of water that flowed down his face afterwards, straight for his eyes. He bathed twice a day all that week, and he overheard his mom tell his dad that she was worried about him. "He's developing some obsessive behaviors," she said, but she didn't sound worried, just amused. Alec wasn't always sure what would amuse her, but he liked how it made her voice sound like honey, and so he kept bathing. That spring, the two of them were walking in a hayfield where the grass was already as tall as his shoulders, even though it was the start of the season. He had turned 8 and was now more than half as tall as his mother. They found, in a depression in the grass, a fawn curled up into a perfect oval, breathing double time. There were no adult deer in sight. "They left her," he said, and his mom patted his back. "Just for a little while," she said. "The mama left the fawn here to stay safe because the fawn is too young to run as fast as her. She'll come back when it's safe." The next morning, Alec sat at the top of the stairs, too afraid to descend. When he finally summoned the courage, there was his breakfast on the table, the apples sliced thin and fanned, the toast cut into crustless triangles. There was the book they were reading together, the boots they had worn on their hike yesterday. He wandered around the house calling for her. "She's gone," his father said from his chair by the window, a book in his hands. "She'll be back." Thank you.
We are now proud to present May Song for the Indented Boy, a short play by Mary Ann Whelan, Ph.D., M.D. Mary Ann has lived in Cooperstown for over 40 years. She is a retired pediatric and adult neurologist at Bassett Hospital, 1982 to 2002, an occasional poet, and the author of one book, Freddie's Last Ride, available on Amazon. Her previous writing has been largely in professional journals and in letters to the editor in the Freeman's Journal, where a retrieved archived ad concerning a reward for the return of a runaway indentured boy was the catalyst for a poem and subsequently this play. She is pleased to have written her first play at the age of 84.
maybe I should have left that last line out of the biography. Okay. Since this play was derived from a genuine 1840 ad in the Freeman's Journal, which was retrieved by Tom Heights in his archives column, and the ad was for the return of a runaway indentured boy, I wanted to say a few words about indenture. This was a practice that was prevalent in America as early as the 17th century, when entire shiploads of boys and young men would arrive, largely on the southeast coast, as young men imported to labor as paid-for indentured servants. Their fathers were the recipients of the money paid for them. Apprenticeship was promised, allegedly leading to the opportunity of acquiring the wealth to be found in this new land. And the indenture involved a contract between the indentee, usually a boy between the ages of 10 and 12, to work for a certain number of years, or until the money his mother had paid, until the money his master had paid to buy him was earned, and paid back to the boy's master to buy his freedom. Sometimes the boy was sold to another person to finish working out his contract. With full payment, the master's half of the contract, which had been torn in two, was returned in whole to the indentee, the two pieces fitting together like teeth in a jaw, and hence the name derived from that. Not infrequently, these boys, gaining adolescence as they grew, ran away before the contract was up. The legality of indenture, which was typically exploitative and deceitful, went state by state, rather like abortion rights today. New York was the first state to outlaw it in 1911, and there are still persons in this community who recall being told about an indentured servant on the family farm. Steve Purcell is one of them, if any of you know Steve. It was not the person who can recall hearing about him. It was as close as we get to a form of typically white slavery. Benjamin Franklin, who was one of 17 children, was indentured at the age of 12 to his much older brother, who taught him printing. He ran away from Philadelphia to New York at the age of 17, and he then himself went on to have an indentured servant, who was the son of the man who had been his master and his own nephew. Today, the closest analogs would be convict labor, which is still legal in about, over half a dozen states, largely in the South, and perhaps being a house officer, or what we used to call interns and residents, at a hospital which has a residency program to work and learn the practice of medicine. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose.
Reprinted from the Freeman's Journal, May 23rd, 1990, as retrieved by Tom Heights. 150 years ago, a $1 reward is offered by Hamilton Waterman of Decatur for the return of Henry Dunham, an indented apprentice boy aged 15.
Well, good day to you, Waterman. What can I do for you?
I'm looking to put an ad in your paper.
Certainly. It'll cost you, though, penny a line. What's it for? Need to sell another cow.
I got a runaway. Damn boy. I paid his father good money for his services, and now he done run out on me.
That boy I seen you with in town?
That's the one.
Damn shame. They do that, though. You're not the first. What do you want to say?
I want him back. I'll pay a reward even, $1.
How about a $1 reward is offered for the return of a runaway boy about age 15. Want to add a description?
How much?
Like I said, penny a line. That there would cost you 2 cents. Be better with the description. A line or two more.
Well, he wasn't worth all that much. Just a boy, not strong like a man. Nothing to look at. No meat in his bones yet. A plain, vacant face, knobby knees. You might even say he was dented here and there. Still, he was useful, chopping wood, getting it in, hauling water, feeding, helping with the haying. Picked some apples, ate as many as he picked, most likely.
You working pretty hard?
We treated him good. Maybe too good. Maybe that was the trouble. Decent place in the barn, he ate what we ate. Winter came, he come right into the house. The missus insisted on that. He's only a boy, she said. So he sat with us in front of the fire and looked at Sarah. She's my youngest. Looking at her hair against the light from the fire, and the wife had brushed it. You know, she's pretty, my Sarah. He looked at the wife, too, but not as a man would look at a woman, more like a calf mooning at his mother. I guess he had a mother once. Had to have. His father never said. I just gave him the money and he gave me the boy. I never had a son, or I wouldn't have needed him. And he never touched my Sarah. By God, he better not. He brought her a present once with money he should have saved to buy his freedom like a decent man. Some trinket he got at one time when we went to town. Put it on the table for her at Christmas. And she took it and said thank you, but she didn't have nothing for him, naturally. I gave him my boots in the winter. There's plenty of good left in them, too.
Probably it was the spring that made him go. He was maybe starting to get his growth. All young things get restless in spring, pushing their way out of the sun, into the sun in the new grass, just drunk with spring. Not thinking about the work need to be done against winter.
Not being responsible. That's a man's job. What a father teaches a son. What I was teaching him. I'll see he learns it if I get him back. He won't get another chance. I'll take away his boots at night. Let him run then. And then he can sleep in the barn summer or winter. There's plenty of other animals there to keep him warm. Till he pays what he owes me. Plus the dollar. That's his doing. He owes me. He owes me more than that. God owed me a son, and he owes me. But I guess I'll pay $1 to get him back.
That'll be another 2 cents. For the physical description, plus his name. What's his name?
All right. Name's Henry.
Henry what?
Dunham. Henry Dunham.
No physical description then.
Too costly.
Be in the next issue. Good luck. Let me know.
Don't do that.
And good luck to you, Henry.
Well, it wasn't the spring that made me go. And it wasn't Sarah wanting to love her. She's nothing but a baby anyhow. If you need to know, I wanted to love her mother more. She's nice. Just, climb up in her lap, right along with Sarah. But I guess I'm kind of big for that. No, it was the fall that made up my mind. Everything ripe and falling. Look ahead, there's winter. I could be in the house with them then. You might think that's better, but it's worse. Like being inside and outside at the same time. It was a family, but I wasn't theirs. Not like I mean. I didn't feel like his. Not like he meant. Why should he own me anyway? Families don't own each other, not like that. I had a family once, I know. Sometimes I think he meant a little of the other kind of owning, but not much. Most of the time he just seemed mad, no matter what I'd done or how much. Like I wasn't the one he wanted somehow. Or like I was, but he couldn't stand it. Must have belonged to my father, but he sold me. Guess he had to. Owing, owning, belonging. I get confused. For a time I wanted to go back, but I knew I couldn't. Then I wanted to come in, but I saw I couldn't. So I made up my mind to run, come the spring. These boots cramp my toes so bad. I must have growed. I ought to take them off, leave them where he could find them. They fit when he gave them to me, but not now. So here's your boots. Now leave me go. I don't owe you. Nothing. Sarah can keep her present. It was something she saw in a store once when we went to town, and every time we went, she'd start to beg and cry. Her father couldn't stand it. He let me work for money down in the stable. Did things I was used to. Sweeping, feeding, hauling water. They gave me a quarter, $50 once. That was a big day. When I had $2, I bought it for her. When somebody wants something so bad and somebody else can get it for him, I don't see why they don't always do it. Her father thought I should save it up, pay him back for my freedom faster. But why was it his to sell?
Matthew,
Yes, my dear.
that notice in the paper.
Concerning Ham Waterman's boy. Shameful business.
I don't blame poor Henry running away like that. They used him day and night in little kindness.
Ham's a hard man, I grant you that. But Mary's a good woman. And he wouldn't have been abused. But I can't agree with the principle. To buy another man's son for his use. And I don't think he is teaching him much.
Matthew, what if he comes here? He knows us, knows we had sympathy.
Why then, we take him in. He can't eat much. Why, he's just Ben's age. The age Ben would be now.
And then if Waterman comes?
Well, then we'd have to give him up. You can't get too attached. I know your feelings, Elizabeth, but the law's the law.
Mother?
Yes, Sarah?
Mother, where's Henry?
I don't know. Now, eat your breakfast, then I need you to help me.
Did he run away?
No. I don't know. Your father's gone to look for him.
Did he run away because he doesn't like us?
He liked you. He gave you that locket, remember? I haven't seen you wear it lately. You didn't lose it, did you? Sarah? Sarah! Come back here! You come back here right now!
And Sarah, being 6, did come back. But Henry kept on going. He didn't go to Matthew and Elizabeth. He ran to the forest. And the forest took him in. It made no special accommodation, though. The ground is still cold in May. His feet, out of the boots, were cut and frozen. The early growth grabbed at him, and overhead the branches tossed and parted, letting the thin moon through in places, letting the night eyes watch his progress. He was seen by more eyes than he saw. He had a hook and line, some meal, and there was plenty of water. He lived like that for a while, always getting further away, never getting closer. When he lay down, the forest took him in.
Our next poem, Women of Rhythms, by Lynn Kemen, is performed by Cassandra Miller. Lynn Kemen lives in upstate New York. Her chapbook, More Than a Handful, was published in 2020. Her work is anthologized in Seeing Things, 2020, and What We See on Our Journeys, 2021. She is published in Silver Birch Press, The Raven's Perch, Fresh Words Magazine, Spill Words, Topical Poetry, Lothlorien Poetry Journal, and Blue Mountain Review. Lynn stands on the board of Bright Hill Press. She is an editor for the Blue Mountain Review and a lifetime member of the Southern Collective Experience. Her full-length book of poetry, Shoes for Lucy, was published by the SCE Press in fall 2023.
To my mind, everything has two distinct halves, have and have not. We can't be bracketed, put into a woven basket, won't be distracted, belted, melted, or meted out. Nature, nurture, plain or exotic, we wear ourselves under fabric so worn it won't breathe. Walking, sleeping, working, lounging, in the wild or in civilization, klimt or harlequin fabric folded, faceless females, synced. We are women of rhythm. We dance with the tides in sync with the stars, not interchangeable, loosely knotted with nature. We're haiku, sands, haughty syllables distilled in dim light.
Our next poem, Salvation, is written and read by Julie Suarez. Julie Suarez is retired from Hardwick College, where she was an assistant professor of English for 34 years. Her poems have appeared in Salmagundi, Phoebe, Women's Voices for the 20th Century, La Presse, The Traveler's Vade Mecum, and the New York Times Sunday Magazine, Plant Human Quarterly, and others. Her chapbook, It Does Not, was published by Bright Hill Press in 2006. In addition to poems, she also gardens and sings with the Catskill Choral Society.
This is the setting for this poem. This is my garden in the community garden plot. Salvation. She is a small girl, thin as a bean sprout, open to all the world, despite her raving mother, drunken stepfather, and the clothes she keeps outgrowing. She likes to watch us, a host of aging gardeners, so busy with our hoeing, chopping, turning over stony soil, hopeful for green. She studies every move, asks, "What is that you're doing?" We explain about seeds and show her how to plant them, and later in the season, what weeds to pull, what bugs to squash, which to encourage. She learns to tread lightly between bean rows, to coax squash vines to twine around the trellis. How proud to see her sunflower rise above her, its bright face shining, open as her own.
Our next piece is August 5th, 2017, by Mary Ladney. It's performed by Joan Badgley. Mary Ladney recently retired from Caldwell University in Caldwell, New Jersey, where she directed the Writing Center. She now lives in the hamlet of Bovina with her husband John and their border collie, Laddie, both of whom appear in the poem you're about to hear. She's thrilled to be part of Write Out Loud 2024.
On the 8th anniversary of our daughter's death, we plant a tree in the front yard of our house. Our new border collie, Laddie, and our next-door neighbor's chocolate lab come to watch. So does Catherine, the girl who lives across the street, who reminds us repeatedly that a new tree must be watered every day, at least twice. It's late afternoon, and there's a particular quality to the light when John stands up to brush the dirt from his knees. The dogs move back startled, but I am struck by how ordinary the afternoon might appear. Now we are ready for the sapling. I loosen the plastic pot and place the tangle of root knots into the ground. John fills in the empty spaces and taps the earth with his foot. Catherine tips the watering can, a gift from my mother. the one with a copper spout, encircles the tree twice. We are done. Later that night, I imagine the roots unfurling, the old soil loosening its grip, free now from what used to contain them. They are spreading, growing into the spacious dark.
Our next piece is Launch by Brian Lachlan. Brian has always had a passion for storytelling and committed himself to studying the various forms it can take. He is a graduate of the Creative Writing Arts program at SUNY Oswego, where he studied writing for novels and for the stage. In recent years, however, he's found a love for poetry, and this year, with some assistance, he published an ebook of 14 poems, one of which he'd like to share with you tonight.
Launch. 10 years on my own, away from all I knew, away from family, though closer to friends, for the very first time without a nearby guide. After spending just 1 year alone, I often wondered how I would spend the next 9. Hidden inside, tucked away from my fear, with my fear in my games, never wanting to step forward. No, learn to walk again. Convince myself that the shaking in my stomach is just something I ate. Try my hand. Escape the cycle of spinning in place and waiting for someone else to say stop. Take charge. Decide. Put as much of myself into every day as I can, and if I truly need help, well, my parents are only a 7-digit number away. Those encouraging voices that have never led me wrong, always ready with a lesson or a joke, or just positive words on their lips. And yet I wandered, never putting words to paper, setting it aside for a time so I could find the job, the girlfriend, the happiness I craved. But is that just a facade? 6 to 1, half a dozen to another. I drifted, never writing, afraid my stories were nothing but air. I focused elsewhere, tried to make my life matter, found a calling of sorts with a young man with a mind you find in movies, a modern-day Rain Man with an ordinary life. I came to his house 5 days a week. That became my life. I love it, it's true. And the friendships I've built here I treasure more than they probably know. This place and these people have pulled me out of despair and fear of feeling so weird. Stared at and mocked. I am something to want. But only now have I wondered, did I do it all for nothing? In the end, do I want an ordinary life with the white picket fence? Will this love I've found, this place that I've built, make me truly feel alive? I wondered all that when I turned in bed and looked at the woman next to me, who says with her eyes just 3 words. Inside the eyes, on the whisper of those words, I understand what it means to have, to her, to see me succeed. I understand that deep down she knows that I want more than her, and the best part is, she wants me to have it. Wants me to rise above the advertised life and reach for something else that I almost gave up striving for. And so I return to water the roots I planted so long ago, buried in the ground but left untended. I am returning to the garden, where my stories and words can bloom. And to get there, it all came down to pursuing that one long-held desire, one decision, one writer. I have kept myself hidden too long. It is time to let go, to finally make permanent the abstract thoughts and impressions and put them all out there, to let the stories I've told never be zero.
Our next story is Culinary Capers, written and read by V.J. Bauer. V.J. Bauer, or Vince if you know him well, lives in New Berlin, New York. He's a writer, poet, playwright, and freelance visual effects artist. Once upon a time, he was the lead writer and assistant editor for an online visual effects magazine. His play, Off the Hook, was performed at Orpheus Theatre in Oneonta. His short stories, flash fiction, and one-act screenplays have had notable recognition in various competitions, and he currently has 3 novels in the speculative and thriller genres in the works. Story is at the center of everything he does, and it drives his creative core. His short story, Culinary Capers, is the 4th in a series of works showcased by Fenimore Art Museum's Write Out Loud program.
Grandma Caper watched from her rocking chair as her grandson paced around her nursing home room. "What's the problem, Henry?" she said, lowering her needles to her lap. "It's Emily," he said. His grandmother raised a brow. "Well, not Emily herself," he said. "It's her parents. They're coming tonight. Emily won't be getting home from the office until late. She wants me to make a meal, keep her parents entertained until she arrives." His grandmother raised both brows. "Right," he said, wagging a finger at her, then pulling it back and rubbing it as an old knuckle scar. "Mr. and Mrs. Prim and Proper. You know how they are, how they feel about me. Everything I do and say is wrong. What am I going to do?" "The first thing you're going to do is calm down," she said. "But Grandma, you heard me. Sit," she said. "You're wrapped tighter than my girdle." He reluctantly sat on the edge of her bed, but couldn't resist rocking while rubbing his hands back and forth across his knees. "Nothing good ever comes from worry," she said. "You need to relax, clear your mind. A solution will come to you. Besides, you come from a long line of cooks, you know. It's in your blood." "More like my blood is in my cooking," he said, rubbing his knuckle anew. Now, she said, lethargically getting up from her rocker. "It's not all that bad. Here," she said, shuffling over to her dresser, rummaging around inside, then pulling out an old leather book and handing it to him. "What's this?" he said, as she gradually returned to her chair. "It's the family cookbook," she said. "Culinary Capers." He ran his fingers over the title's raised lettering, then carefully untied its leather straps. "Goes back generations," she said. "Herbs and spices, potions and powders, homemade ingredients for magical meals." He chuckled while flipping its browning pages, held together in places with peeling Scotch tape. "Fantastic frittatas," he read. "Peculiar pasta primavera," read another. "I'd given it to my daughter had I had one," she said. "No granddaughters seem to be coming any time soon. The time seems right to pass it along to you. There should be something in there that is easy and will do the trick." "I think I found it," he said. "Mystical meatloaf. Perfect. You can't screw that up." He quickly ran his fingers down the ingredients, nodding, understanding, then stopped suddenly. "What?" she said. "It says I'm supposed to use a pound of ground beef, 1 egg, a box of stuffing, a cup of water, and a half a cup of barbecue sauce." "Yeah, so what's the problem?" she said. He turned the book towards her and pointed to the margin. "It also says that I'm supposed to recite this spell while dancing around the kitchen, plucking out strands of my hair to add to the loaf as a lively zest." She leaned forward, reading the scribbling, and then sat back with a chuckle. "Ah, Granny," she said, "I do miss you." He looked at her, puzzled. "Your great-great-gran," she said, returning to her knitting. She could cook up some memorable meals, that one. Pulled ingredients from recipes long before her time. Tinkered with them, experimented. Took heed of the notes in the margins that we'd think were better suited today while wearing a pointed hat under the glow of a full moon. She loved dressing up at Halloween. She had a gift for fun and laughter. Childlike. Taught me early on to do the same, to not take myself so seriously, that life would be so much a bore if I didn't enjoy putting my all into it. Right, he said, like pulling out my hair. Better than pulling teeth, she said, brandishing an open-mouthed grin, mostly of gums. That evening, he followed the recipe's instructions, feeling foolish, dancing around his kitchen, pulling out strands of his curly red hair while saying, "With locks of mine I add the spell, that in this meatloaf joy will dwell. With every bite and every chew, a childlike whimsy will ensue." "This is insane," he said, spooning the mixture into a large loaf tin to bake, then adding his beard hairs to the dessert. "Emily's going to kill me." When his in-laws arrived and settled around the table, Henry nervously uncovered the loaf, slowly sliced into it, and then offered each a piece. "Dad, sir, may I?" His father-in-law sat stoic, signaling with a slight nod of approval. Henry carefully placed the thick, tender slice with a scoop of roasted broccoli. "Mom," he repeated, receiving a similar nod, then carefully dished out the same. At first, his in-laws were unmoved. And when Henry sat back in his chair, he suddenly felt awkward, like he had forgotten some trivial etiquette preventing them from partaking in their meal. But once he dished a similar portion for himself, they waited no longer and took their first bites. "Oh my God," Emily gasped, entering the kitchen, dropping her briefcase unceremoniously. She watched wide-eyed as her mother's sleek, elegant hair transformed into a reddish wild mass that defied gravity. Her father's salt and pepper hair stood on end, with each strand spiking outward in a different direction, changing from gray to red, then coiling up into curls before spiking outward again. They dropped their forks and sat stunned, motionless, watching with fascination as their hairdos relaxed into their pristine states. Emily's father looked squarely at Henry, then down to his plate, cautiously picking up his fork and taking another bite. Her mother burst out in laughter, clapping like an excited child as her husband's hair came to life, flexing every which way as if each strand was part of a choreographed dance. Like little children at play, her parents began an eating frenzy, oblivious to those around them. They ate faster and faster, pointing at each other with guttural giggles while shoveling food into their mouths as if trying to beat the other at finishing first. Henry thought that at any moment they would start throwing food at each other. When not a morsel was left on their plates, they each took a deep breath and slowly sighed as they regained their dignified composure, returning to their prim and proper personas. Henry held his breath, anticipating a scolding for his menacing meal. His father-in-law, elbows on the table, clasped his hands over his plate, looking down at it as if praying, while his mother-in-law poked and preened regarding her appearance in her compact mirror without saying a word. "Mom," Emily said, "Dad, are you all right?" Her mother gently reached over and squeezed her husband's wrist ever so slightly. Emily's dad had grown red in the face, but with the touch of his wife, he gradually calmed and then placed his hand over hers, returning an affirming nod as if the two had come to a mutual understanding and agreement. "Sir, I can explain," Henry tried to speak, but his father-in-law cut him off with a commanding hand raise. "Son," he said, "Henry, we don't want to hear your explanations. We don't care. What happened, happened. We don't want to know about any of it, and we certainly don't want any of what happened to ever be spoken about to anyone else. It stays in the family. Do you understand? Of course, Henry said, whatever you like. What we'd like, he said, looking at his wife, with that mutual understanding and agreement passing between them, but this time with a smile and a childlike, mischievous, under-the-breath giggle. What we'd like is to know only one thing. Henry raised a brow. What did you make for dessert?
Our next poem is March, written and read by Dan Devona. Dan Devona lives along the Susquehanna River in Afton, New York, where he and his wife, Linda, have raised 3 children. The lessons and insights of his family and his hillside place in the world have fed his poetry for 40 years.
March. In summer, this will seem too cool. But today, 2 weeks into March, the door is open, and the sun pours up upon the porch. The flattened grass, flecked with glassy-backed leaves, shines like a polished pan in this morning light. This is not new, I tell myself, only returning once again, but it is so unlike other returns, not worn or older or cynical. The horizon glows white even before noon. Each sprig bathes in the breeze and the rays of the sun. Old tree limbs squeak, their tops moaning from the heat. I'm not exactly warm in my flannel shirt, but the sun tamps the chill with its directness on us all. Me, the porch planks, the front wall stones. I do not need to see the rushing creek. Its sounds surrounds like joyful voices rising up to the trees. And when I walk on the west side of the house, in an area the size of an infield, 10,000 sunflower hulls speckle the ground for 4 months of winter birds shucking their supper. The husks, like this husk, will find their way into the next seasons, becoming soil, becoming sustenance, becoming always something new returning.
Our next piece is February 5th, written and read by Christine Hauser. Like most of her writing, Christine Hauser considers herself a work in progress. A mother, gardener, and former stagehand, notably the first woman contract electrician on Broadway in 1976, she ages gracefully on a small homestead purchased in 1984 in the hamlet of South Gilboa, New York, where she and her late husband raised their family. For her own enjoyment, Christine has participated in local writing groups since 2001 and currently facilitates the Stamford Library Writers Circle. She recently returned to the board of directors of Performance Plus of Stamford, New York, a not-for-profit corporation she founded in 1997 dedicated to enriching the lives of the underserved rural population of the region through the performing arts. She has one self-published work, Pioneer's Spirit, an edited collection of her mother's and grandmother's memories of homesteading in Saskatchewan.
February 5th. I pulled a scrap of your red plaid flannel shirt from the pocket of my Carhartt jacket. How many times on any cold winter day have I reached into that pocket for gloves? But today, a scrap of you emerges, remnant from the quilt, sewed years past now, after you were gone, so as not to forget the feel of you. A scrap, lost among the wads of Kleenex and cough drops, reminds me that today, long ago, you came here. We braved the roof 2 stories up in bitter cold and wind to finish the wood stove chimney, then lit a fire. After, despite the wind and cold, you said you had a great time and asked to come again next week. Happy anniversary. Can you remember me as I remember you?
Our next piece is Characters Are People Too by T.M. Bradshaw, performed by Daniela Henrici. T.M. Bradshaw decided to be a writer at the age of 9, but but first came a path of varied employment, from live-in nanny to computer programmer to compositor, eventually settling down to writing for area newspapers and magazines. Currently, she writes Catskills Past, a monthly history column for the Catskill Mountain Region Guide. She has had poems, essays, and short stories appear in anthologies, from the 2001 Barnes & Noble-produced Crafty Little Cat Crimes to a new connection with Bellinger Books, producer of anthologies of Sherlock Holmes tales. In June 2023, her story, The Adventure of the Missing Gambler, appeared in the Consultations of Sherlock Holmes. 2 other stories have been accepted for forthcoming volumes, Sherlock Holmes Takes the Stage and Sherlock Holmes and the Great Lady Detectives. The occasional blog post, as well as information about her books of local history, appear at tmbradshawbooks.com.
I've always loved a good mystery story. Many a late night in my teens was spent in the kitchen, the spot where I was least likely to disturb anyone else, reading Edgar Allan Poe and Sherlock Holmes stories. I know. One is an author, the other a fictional character, but that was Arthur Conan Doyle's achievement. He created a character whose fame eclipsed his creator. And that's what I've always wanted to do. Write mysteries and create a character who steps off the page and into the world. So far, no luck on that. Let's peek at a partially written story, I have lots of those, that starts with a woman writer who has rented an isolated house on a private lake in New Hampshire. It's the only house on the lake, at the end of a half-mile-long private drive down from a dirt road. There are 4 bedrooms on the main floor, but she's chosen the attic bedroom, accessed through a trapdoor in the ceiling or floor, depending on which side you're on. I think I can set the stage all right, perhaps with something like this. The attic bedroom was cozy, furnished with every charming 1950s vacation house cliché you can imagine. Lamps fashioned out of green glass bottles filled with marbles sat on nightstands protected by crocheted doilies. Switch plates reminded one to outen the light. Stacks of ancient paperbacks and copies of Popular Mechanics added their old paper smell to the fragrance that could only be described as attic. Perhaps it was something exuded by unpainted wood aged through periods of summer heat alternating with winter's unheated damp. Lying in bed provided the perfect angle to view a quarter moon and clusters of stars so dense they appeared cloud-like. An owl hooted in the distance, and a soft breeze gently stirred a small wind chime. Tracy's eyelids fluttered, and she drifted off. She'd been practicing lucid dreaming as a means of trying on plots for her stories. Tonight's dream was developing nicely. In it, a restaurant owner suspected his wife of having an affair with the chef and locked him in the walk-in freezer. But he didn't know that the chef kept a revolver in the freezer, stashed behind the frozen chicken breasts. When the chef shot at the lock to open the door, the bullet came out the other side and hit the restaurateur. The flash of light and bang from the gun were startling. Tracy sat up in bed, disoriented in the dark and unsure of where she was. Rain, driven by high winds, beat against the window. Another brilliant flash illuminated the sky, followed almost immediately by the deep, echoing reverberations of thunder. Ah, so it hadn't been a gunshot after all. Her sleeping self had incorporated the storm's reality into her dream. Time to write it down so it wasn't lost to more sleep. She reached over and turned on the lamp. No light. The storm must have knocked out the electricity. Even though there was no cell service here, she had left her phone on the nightstand from force of habit. Good thing, too. She wasn't familiar enough with the room to navigate it in the dark. She reached for the pad and pencil on the nightstand. She jotted down the dream as best she could, holding the phone in one hand, aiming its flashlight at the pad. Notes captured, she turned her attention to the window. The brightness of the lightning flashes alternating with the dense dark of the night mimicked a stop-action film, each scene visible for just a moment, revealing tree branches whipping one way on this flash, bending opposite on the next. During one flash, she saw what seemed to be a 6-foot log land in the water. It would have made more sense if it were a whole tree with branches uprooted in the storm. The next flash made it clear. Logs didn't come in plaid, and what had just landed in the water was wearing a plaid shirt. But see, then I'm not sure what to do with it all. I just don't like to kill anyone, even on the page. So a lot of my victims are merely injured. But what's a murder mystery without a body? Or 2? Why, there are often 3 in an episode of Midsummer Murders. Oh yes, my fascination with mysteries extends into what I watch. Poirot, Vanderwalk, Inspector Morse and his younger self, Endeavor, Inspector Lewis, Vera, Monk, and House. I know. House was a doctor, but we all know he was Sherlock in disguise. It always comes back to Sherlock. Here's what I did with him for an upcoming anthology, The Consultations of Sherlock Holmes. 2 weeks, Watson! Intolerable! Surely there must be something you can do to speed that up. I'm afraid not, Holmes. Walking around on that ankle any sooner will delay your recovery. You need to rest, sitting with your foot up on that hassock. But Watson, what if we should be required on a case? Let's hope that won't happen, Holmes. He gave a quick, short bark of a laugh. I shall hope for no such thing, for that would be far worse. I must have problems to solve. Without outlets for my abilities, my constitution grows stagnant. At this last comment, I noticed his darting glance toward the drawer where I knew his cocaine and its foul apparatus lay, as if reassuring himself that an avenue of escape remained. Like most people, my good friend Sherlock Holmes was a collection of contradictions. I'd known him to spend many days in a row, perfectly content, lazing about in his mouse-colored dressing gown, reviewing materials from his files and commonplace books, smoking endless pipefuls of the shag he kept in the Persian slipper on the mantelpiece, his head wreathed in clouds of smoke, while he thought through a chain of facts. Why, on some of those occasions, he even reacted violently to the suggestion that we needed to go out to further an investigation. But because inactivity was his doctor's prescription, he was prepared to find it abhorrent. Perhaps you could spend the time working on a new monograph. Haven't you long been planning one on malingering? To spend time considering methods of avoiding work by pretending to be ill while one is enduring enforced idleness while desiring to be active does not strike me as a satisfying occupation. No, it will not do. At that moment, we heard footsteps upon the stairs, followed by a tentative knock. "Come in," Holmes shouted. "Ah, Watson, perhaps we will have some diversion after all." That was a story I managed to finish, but while it contained some offstage violence, there were no human corpses. When I do manage to finish a character off, it's usually either someone thoroughly unlikable or a character we never meet, one who is dead from the first sentence. My next problem is deciding who did it, because I hate to burden any of my characters with the guilt. So, again, I lean toward the thoroughly despicable. But it works so much better when the killer is the sweet little old lady who lives with 17 cats. The person you would never, ever expect. Consider the sweet and charming sisters of Arsenic and Old Lace. Another one that works well is the universally respected doctor, pillar of the community, who just can't stand his belittling wife one more second. That's a good combination because we don't like her either. But then I think, can't he just leave? Get a divorce? The only cure may be to choose in advance. Perhaps assign each character color and put marbles or beads of those colors in a hat and draw out a victim and a murderer. Or perhaps affix cut-out magazine pictures corresponding to my group to a dartboard and have at them. William Faulkner is credited with the advice, in writing, you must kill all your darlings. But I don't think this is exactly what he meant.
Our penultimate piece tonight is entitled The Song on the Wind. It's written and performed by Sarah Marie White. Sarah Marie is from Bethlehem, New York. In her free time, she loves to read, draw, take photos of the world around her, watch movies and videos, listen to music, and experiment with multiple different forms, styles, and genres of writing. She likes to think of herself as a fairly empathetic and kind person, as well as the kind who do anything for her friends. She has been described as both a creation of liquid magic and a ball of chaotic awesomeness. All that aside, she's very excited to perform for you today.
The Song on the Wind. There's a song on the wind now. It winds up through the grass, whistles at the moon, and echoes to the stars. As the stars begin to laugh, they shine brighter than ever before. The ocean shimmers under their radiant light, and the trees begin to sway back and forth like an endless, joyous dance. Tunes twirl on the river and chime through the sun and decrescendo like soft snow in the cacophony of beautiful life. The songbirds hum along, and the wolves howl out a melody, and the fish bubble a harmony. The crickets chirp out a beat. The seasons change from spring to summer to autumn to winter, and then it repeats itself, just like it always has, just like it always will. Humanity is dead. There's not much to say about it now, I suppose. Not like there's anyone here to care about it. Oh, sure, it's a pretty thought to believe that one human would survive to be our legacy, that we could escape, that we would start new civilizations, or at the very least, a new intelligent civilization would start. It's a comforting idea that in our absence everything would descend into ruin, that the world couldn't survive without us. But it can, and it will. Life goes on, I'm afraid, and for your information, if you'd ever care to listen, we were the ones that ruined it. There's a song on the wind now, like a fading memory. The metallic tang of machinery and the cold clinical beeping of technology. A twisted melody of steamboats and glass towers that stretched up to the sky. A harmony of explosions combined with the tempo of gunshots piercing through someone's brain. One final closing note. The bomb and the hum of a radioactive glow over a city of rubble and ash. The amphitheater collapsed in on itself. There's no one to watch the world fall apart anymore. No one left to complain. No more stupid debates or petulant fights or empty threats. There is simply nothing. It's a bit lonely, but life moves on. There's a song on the wind now, as old as time itself. On one unimportant continent, in one unimportant country, along with the rubble of an unimportant city, sits the haggard base of one unimportant house. Before the end of everything, perhaps it belonged to an unimportant person. Not that it matters now. But perhaps it was a single mother of 3 who worked 2 jobs to feed her family. Or perhaps it was a young kid who had been kicked out of their house and was saving up money by squatting in an empty home so they could move in with their partner. Or perhaps it was a content old man waiting for his children to finally come and visit him. It all got erased when the bombs came down, or so they would say if they were still here to say it. The truth is it was erased long before then, because, as a matter of fact, it didn't matter what they looked like or what they stood for or who they were or who they loved. What mattered was that they were human. They all smiled and cried. They all laughed and spoke. They all told stories and sang songs. They all danced and cooked and played and lived. And if you cut them, they would bleed warm, red, iron-filled blood, just the same as you and me. But none of that mattered when the bombs fell. Blood was shed, and stories were forgotten, and tensions rose, and fights continued, and we stopped speaking, and we stopped singing, and we stopped dancing, or humming, or whistling, or smiling, or cooking, or playing, or crying, because there were no tears left to cry. We forgot what we were fighting about. It was trivial at that point. We knew we weren't going to survive. The children were the first to go, tears still streaming down their plump little faces, their cheeks flushed with the warm red blood behind them as they curled up in fear next to their peers and siblings, stuck together in tightly packed hallways and muggy schools as they turned to face their inevitable death. The guns, the bombs, the trauma, it happened over and over, and even those who survived were already gone, so they finished the job before someone else could, and the adults blamed everyone but themselves until there was nothing left but that one haggard house, chipping paint melting off of white wooden walls. There's a song on the wind now, whispering a tragic story of times long past. In truth, I don't know who lived in that house, but I can tell you one thing. At the corner of their room sat a potted plant, gifted to them by some relative or partner or sibling or friend, or perhaps bought with money they earned selling their soul away to work that consumed all of their time. When the bombs fell, the house was destroyed, but the plant's pot broke, and it managed to burrow beneath the ground like the mice beneath the floorboards. And then, within the dust and ashes and aftermath, when we thought nothing would ever live again, something happened. Something that, if you had been alive to see it, would have been entirely unremarkable. The tree began to grow. The branches twisted like string and stretched and shifted as bright green buds on golden branches bloomed into polka-dotted black and white petaled flowers and began to drip water into the house's empty base, and the smell of fruit as sweet as honey nectar called animals from miles around. There's a song on the wind now of new hope. And so the walls decayed, as the water eroded its way into the earth and became a watering hole for all the foxes and rabbits that emerged confused from their burrows, the deer that leapt from burnt forests, and the lonely cats and dogs that ran from their homes before the bombs hit the ground, only to return to nothing. They all found their way to this one incredibly remarkable tree. Swallows and owls and ravens and sparrows and bluebirds and robins and pigeons and doves perched on its branches, beginning to hum a tune, as the crickets, ladybugs, and ants dug into the trunk, creating a soft, steady beat. Snakes hissed, and frogs croaked, and dogs whined, and cats purred, while the bunnies hopped and the wolves howled, creating a beautiful, melodic cacophony of life. Even with your pessimism, I think you would agree that it is something truly glorious. There's a song on the wind now, of glory and triumph and love and empathy. Eventually more trees will grow and stretch up to the sky, piercing the sky and teasing the stars. They spell out nonsense words of a joyous melody that expands out to infinity. You would love it if you were still here. You all would. But the truth is, you could have enjoyed it long before now. It's always been there, no matter how quietly, but I suppose no one ever stopped to notice. No one ever stopped to care. And now you're not here to appreciate it. And you never will be again. There's a song on the wind now. Can you hear it? Are you listening?
The final piece of this year's performance is Cooperstown, An Insider's Guide by Robert Harlow. Originally from Massachusetts, Robert Harlow resides in Voorheesville, New York. He holds MFA and PhD degrees and taught literature and writing for many years at the University of Arizona and the University at Albany. He is the author of Places Near and Far from Louisiana Literature in 2018. His poems appear in many journals and online, or so he would like to believe. His most important accomplishment in life is being related to Taylor Swift, another thing he would also like to believe.
I think Mike just made that up. I'm not sure. Actually, I would like to thank Mike and for the wonderful venue we have here. It's been a nice experience. And the Taylor Swift thing is actually true. I am related to her, and I'd like to not believe on the inspiration for her latest tortured poets department. No, it may not be true. Cooperstown, an insider's guide. Living here is a blessing and a curse. When I tell someone where I live, I'm always asked if I've ever been to the Hall of Fame. Too many times to count, I'll tell them. But sometimes I'll say no just to see their reaction. It's kind of an inside joke to us townies, and when out-of-state friends or relatives come for a visit, they assume I'll take them there and go in with them. You're on your own, I'll say. Phone me when you're done. And moving here from Boston, I was born knowing about the curse of the Bambino, and I'm so glad it's over, even though I never believed it. The blessing is that it's Cooperstown, a small, beautiful village at the end of Otsego Lake where the Susquehanna begins, and that you could walk right by the hall and not know it's there, understated and subtle enough not to call attention to itself with garish lights or signs. The curse is that summer weekends are best left to baseball fans and other tourists. Usually there's never too many of them to worry about, and most are polite and bedazzled by the dozens of souvenir shops willing for a price to engrave your name on a bat, or you can buy a baseball cap in every incarnation of a major league team and almost any minor league team, making it easy for us to know where you live, or at least who you root for. How are things in Baltimore, I'll ask, even though I don't really care. The friendly local color character I'm trying hard to become, bearded but not grizzled, harmless to fish, flesh and fowl, and to some Yankees fans. Boston boy, remember? Ignored more often than not. On the day when the new inductees are ushered into the hall, our almost always otherwise peaceful village imitates an oceanside town on the Cape or the Jersey Shore. Even though our long, narrow lake doesn't look anything like the sea, there are too many fans, too many cars, too much of everything to venture into town. But the secret I hold back is a small cement stoop and lone door about 20 feet from the main entrance to the hall, where the first inductee ceremony was held, right on Main Street, not like it is now, in a field about a mile away. Beside that door, a small brass plaque lets you know that Grover Alexander, Ty Cobb, Eddie Collins, Walter Johnson, Nap LaJoy, Connie Mack, Babe Ruth, George Sisler, Trish Speaker, Honus Wagner, and Cy Young were inducted there on June 12, 1939. How many of the names do you recognize? What teams did they play for? And what positions? If you don't know the answers, I'll take you in and show you their plaques and personal items. Even blindfold me, I'll still be able to guide you because I know where they are by heart. Whenever I go downtown, I sit on the stoop for a while, or on the steps of the post office located right across the street, and watch people pass by the small brass plaque, eye level high, telling what happened on that day when some of the greatest players of all time stood there together. I'm always surprised that few, if anyone, notices or stops to read the plaque, and I won't tell them it's there, my little secret. It's safe with you, isn't it? Maybe I'll point it out if you come to visit, but don't come in summer. That's when you'll find me, most likely at home, watching the Red Sox and Yankees, who always seem to have something other than baseball in mind whenever they meet. Each team more intent on proving the other team wrong than thinking about what it takes to win the game or to make it into the Hall of Fame. If any of your favorite players do get in, come and see me, unless you're wearing a Yankees cap, I'll point you to the entrance. You remember, it's right across the street from the post office. Thank you.